is on the threshold of fundamental change. You will see in the next few years more change than you imagine is possible. Not because we're great human beings, but because circumstances are now conspiring in such a manner that we are rising in revolt. And those in office cannot any longer sustain their power and position without bringing about change. They will vacillate, they will obfuscate, they will lie to us, they will pretend, they will cheat. They're good at all these things, but eventually they will have to bring about the change, because otherwise they will not survive in office. They will change the country not because they love us, but because they love themselves, but because they want change in order to survive. Make no mistake about it. There are some others who will say, but we're all corrupt. Because there are not many among us who did not pay a bribe sometime or the other. How many of you, directly or indirectly, had to pay a small baksheesh or a bribe to get something done, a birth certificate, to a ration card, to an income certificate? How many of you? The majority. So there is this sense of oppression. There is this feeling of guilt that we are all scoundrels, the scum of humanity. In fact, this is the most powerful force acting against collective action. A belief that we have somehow compromised ourselves. You know, a very prominent former civil servant once told me this story, and I have his permission to actually recount the name, to give the name. He is B.J. Deshmukh, a former cabinet secretary. A former ambassador to Moscow, who became the foreign secretary of India. He was posted in Delhi after some years in Moscow. He called on the cabinet secretary as a matter of courtesy. Eric Gonsalves was the man. Eric called on the cabinet secretary. In the course of the conversation, Deshmukh asked him, Eric, I know you built a house in the Trans-Jamuna area. This will be your last posting in government. Would you like to live in the government house or in your private home? He said, sir, I now built this home and I know I'll settle down there. The house rent allowance is now quite satisfactory. I would like to live there, but there's a problem. He said, what's the problem? Eric said, you know, the house is completed in all respects, but we could not electrify it. The house is not electrified. We don't have electricity connection yet. And then B.J. Deshmukh, you know, he laughed aloud, because there's this banter between services, the IAS and the IFS. The IFS fellows are all talkers, they're not doers. IAS fellows, no, they're the macho people who get things done. So he said, what's the point? I mean, you're a foreign service guy, you could not even get this small thing done. Your own service colleague, your senior in service, Ramesh Bhandari, he was then the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. He said, the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, could you not get it done? He's the boss of Delhi city. What sort of fellows are you? He laughed. He said, sir, I went to Ramesh Bhandari. Bhandari promised to do whatever he could. He summoned the chief engineer and gave instructions to him that you must give electricity connection. The directions went down the line. The assistant engineer, who ultimately had to do this, he said, Lieutenant Governors may come and Lieutenant Governors may go, but I stay here forever. If you don't pay me a bribe, I will not give you the connection. No chance. Sir, I've given up. Now, Deshmukh was very angry. He was livid. He said, this is ridiculous. We can't allow this to happen. He summoned then DESU chief, Delhi Electricity Supply Undertaking chief, and he said, I will get you posted to Andamans if you don't give electricity connection to this home within the next 1 week. That man shook like jelly. After all, the cabinet secretary, who had the ear of the prime minister, who had immense power in parliament, unlike the prime minister today, he controlled 420 or so MPs in parliament at the time. He gave the instructions. So there's no escape. So this man shook like jelly. A month later, Eric Gonsalves met the cabinet secretary again in connection with an official meeting. The cabinet secretary remembered the earlier conversation and said, Eric, what happened? Have you got the electricity connection? He said, sir, I didn't want to tell you what happened, but now that you asked me, let me tell you. The electricity connection was given to my home and all the other homes, but the supply is not yet given. This is a real story. And therefore I realized that there's nothing I can do except paying a bribe, because after all, after you I can only go to the Prime Minister. And if I go to the Prime Minister for a small little personal favor like a household power connection, I lose my authority, moral authority to deal with him in the Foreign Office. So all of us pulled up 1,000 rupees per household. We got now the connection and the supply, sir, thank you. This is the real life story. The moral is, if you paid a bribe because you were a victim of extortion, it's too bad. But don't have too many moral qualms about it. Don't think of yourselves as a scoundrel. It's a ridiculous way of looking at the world. Even Mahatma Gandhi did not launch a satyagraha for a birth certificate of his daughter. Please remember. Because his sense of humanity, his izzat was so insulted that though he had a first-class ticket, he was thrown out of the coach, baggage. He felt outraged, and that made him a Mahatma, not a birth certificate. If the Mahatma was made to go to the municipal office 20 times to get a birth certificate, and if the choice was to pay a bribe of 5 rupees or to get a birth certificate, wait for a birth certificate for 3 months, probably most people would have chosen to pay a bribe. I'm not condoning that conduct. I'm saying there are compulsions. We are all victims of extortion. Do not confuse this with being a part of corruption. Do not confuse this with being immoral personally and paralyze yourselves to inaction. It is like blaming a beautiful girl who is walking on the streets of Mumbai for being molested. She is a victim of molestation. She deserves justice. She paid the price. She is not the guilty party. You and I are victims of corruption, of extortion on a daily basis in 100 transactions in dealing with the government, from the national level to the local level. You cannot fight it alone. You can fight it only collectively through informed assertion. Individually, if you fight, the price you pay for fighting corruption is much greater than the benefit that accrues to you. This is what a man called Robert Wade, he described some 30 years ago. He wrote perhaps the most insightful work on corruption in India. He talked about a dangerously stable equilibrium. How hard it is for an individual in the system, a citizen, an employee of government who is otherwise corrupt and clean, an officer, or even a minister, how tough it is to maintain integrity and to get things done. You become a victim of circumstances. Don't agonize over it too much. A bribe giver is a thoroughgoing rascal in a different situation, that is collusive corruption. When the bribe giver and the bribe taker together fleece the society, and the 2G spectrum is a classic example of that. Both together fleece the society. That is where the fellow is a rascal, is guilty. Not a fellow who paid 50 rupees to get a birth certificate. In this very city, Syed Kirmani, who was in those days at least an iconic figure because he was then a test cricketer, for some time a captain. In India, after all, a test cricketer is God. That's the next person to God, as far as we are concerned. And while he was a test cricketer, one day he went to the BMC office. Is it BMC? Bangalore Mahanagarapalike?
Yeah, BMP.
Okay, BMP.
BMP.
Forgive me. BMP office for a death certificate. Syed Kirmani himself told me 14 years ago, when I was addressing a group of officers of SBI, I think he was an SBI officer if I'm not mistaken, about his experience. He was a test playing cricketer at the time, and a very iconic cricketer. Kirmani was a darling of the masses. He was a great wicket keeper and a great batsman. And the lady at the counter, a lady incidentally, the lady at the counter demanded money. He said, look, I need this. She said, you pay, she mentioned a figure of 100 rupees if I'm not mistaken. You can take it tomorrow. He said, look, I have to go on a world tour, on an international test tour tonight. I'll pay you 200, can I get it now? She said, no problem, give me 200, and he got it. This was the plight of Kirmani in Bangalore city. I haven't met him for 14 years. Go ask him if this is true or not. Don't agonize over it. Do not paralyze yourselves. We as citizens have a right to demand a corruption-free society, demand accountability from these rascals, and demand punishment. Don't think that if Arvind's law becomes a law, all of us have been fighting for such things over the years. That's what Administrative Reforms Commission has advocated. That's what I have done in Andhra Pradesh, placed it before the assembly on the first day of the assembly after I was elected to office.